And it looks like we're live according to YouTube. So, can somebody let me know whether you're hearing me and seeing me okay at the moment? Thanks, Alpha Wolf. Can anybody hear and see me? Because talking to myself is something I'm prone to do, but it's something that this isn't about. Yep, thanks, Darren. Appreciate that. Yeah, so welcome to the birthday month live stream. The birthday's actually on the 17th, and our nephew's going to be here for that. So it's all going to be chaotic that week. But I thought I'd do a little bit of a live stream. The thing with the live stream, as you can see from the thumbnail, is horror. So I'm going to be doing a bit of horror stuff, a bit of show and tell. I'm going to show the box sets that I got as slightly premature birthday presents, and everything should flow from there. Then we'll do a bit of an ask me anything, and I can just answer the questions. Thanks a lot, Lee. Appreciate that. Yucky da, dude. Thanks, Bedhead. Yeah, so I've actually got a lot of stuff done in the last couple of weeks, which is surprising to me. And I can show you some of it if I can get my tablet to work. I've got a new shelving system in the back room where all the movies and DVDs go. Darren, um, take care. Don't get in trouble at work, mate. Thanks a lot, FG. That's what it looks like. That's the new shelving units in the back room. So a middle-aged geek guy and I put those together yesterday, kind of, sort of. And I've stacked all the shelves up here. Where's it? Up here? Ah, it's gone away. They'll stuff that up, haven't I? Up in this corner are all the imprint ones and a lot of the box sets and things, and over this side is the TV stuff. So yeah, very busy and a slightly sore back, but I'm glad I'm finally getting that room organized. And I will be recording more videos as I used to up in the back room, rather than just here on the wonderful little webcam I've got. How's everybody doing? What have you been watching? What's been happening in your world? Better you need something like that. It looks good. Yeah, it is. I was very happy that they do have black ones, and they also have. Wow, Darren, thank you. I'm impressed. Thank you very, very much, Darren, and I appreciate that super chat. If you have a question later on, or if you can sneak in, or you need to ask me anything, happy to answer it. Lee says, I've finally seen the holdovers. Wow, what a film. I've got that on my list. I want to see it. I'm a big Paul Giamatti fan. I want to see the holdovers. Roger Morgan says, I use the old Walmart style of storage, just pile them high. Yeah, I used to do that with particularly VHSs back when I had VHSs. But yeah, the one you want is going to be the second from the bottom on an enormous pile of stuff. And you kind of got to shoulder the pile to pull out one of them. That doesn't work long term. So I'm much happier with this system. It's really okay. Take care, Darren. Look after yourself. Hi, Keith F. Greetings from Yorkshire. Happy birthday for later. Thank you. It's on the 17th, if you hadn't heard, Keith. And Ben, it says, for the first time, watch Wonka. My name is Trinity Straightjacket, Abominable Dr. Fives, and caught up again with Summerfield. The last four are terrific. Luna's outside, Dean, by the way. Luna is outside at the moment. She's wandering around the backyard, as is her wont early in the morning. She may show up, she may not. But I do have some footage of Luna that I'm going to put into probably the next video, because she was doing some very cute things on the desk and I managed to catch some of the video on the phone. Friday says, shared the joy that is Joe's apartment with a friend today. Yeah, I mean, any movie that can make cockroaches cute is pretty damn wonderful. Hi, Barry. How you doing? Yeah, so quite busy here, getting a lot of stuff done. And I've also got to do a thing where we've got the nephew out from Monday till Friday 1 week. He's coming down from Sydney and he's 14 years old. So I've got to stack videos, which I don't normally do. I usually do my videos last minute. But because he's coming down on the 15th, I've got to stack videos. So the rest of this week is going to be just producing videos for me. Nothing else apart from maybe a couple of gym visits, but nothing else seriously. And I've really got to hit it hard so I get a week's worth of videos stacked so that I don't have to bother with that when Billy turns up. Lee says, middle-aged good girl's fine. She's on the chat, so she can say hello for herself. Lee says, decided not to see Godzilla X Kong. June Part 2 was WTF in a good way. Yeah, it was. I really liked Denis Villeneuve's work. I've liked it since Arrival. I think, did he do Arrival? Yeah. I've liked his stuff. I think he's got a good sensibility for science fiction in cinema, and he knows science fiction as a genre, which is a big start. So many people dive into the genre, people like, say, Ridley Scott, who know sweet fuck all about it, but I still like, um, particularly people like Denis Villeneuve, who know the genre, who are willing to deep dive and who have a broad knowledge of science fiction before they make science fiction movies. Kane, hi, Kane. I watched Trafficked, Irish drama from 2004. I think it was Ruth Neggar's first film. Okay, that one might be an interesting one to see. Keith F says, recently saw The Cabinet of Caligari, not the German silent horror film. Have I seen it? Hold that thought, is all I'm going to say to you, Keith. Hold that thought. Hi, Toby. Thank you for the happy birthday wishes. Middle-aged good girl says she's here watching the chat. She might build a miniature as well as the chat is tame. She's good. Yeah, so middle-aged good girl's keeping an eye on you while she makes little Japanese miniatures. So don't misbehave or she will slap you down hard. By the way, I've got to mention this because it's an obligation on all YouTubers. If you haven't, just like the video and subscribe. And if you see that little dollar sign down there and you want to give me a little bit of birthday love so that I can buy more things to fill up the shelves that I don't really have space for, please feel free to do so. I also got my coffee. One of my birthday presents from Middle Aged Geek Girl is this really nice earthenware coffee cup, which is the one I have every morning since I got it as my first coffee of the morning. Can't go past a good espresso. But yeah, so horror movies. Now, I was thinking about horror movies the other day while I was assembling shelves and things. No, Keith, we don't have a psychic connection, but great minds think alike. So I was thinking about horror movies the other day, and I was thinking about how desensitized to horror I am. When I first watched horror movies as a kid, they blew the top of my head off. They were scary, they were terrifying, and they were deliciously scary and terrifying. Now, because of my particular unusual upbringing, I had a lot of real life things that were scary, and were horrifying, and they gave me nightmares. Horror movies never did. And so, from a very early age, I decided to use horror movies and things like roller coasters and amusement park rides as a way of managing my fear of things, so that when the real life things that I had to deal with as a child came up, I'd be braver to those things. So, in a weird way, horror movies were a training vehicle for me to manage being scared by things. I didn't want to not be scared by horror movies, but I also had another agenda with them, which is somewhat unusual. And I'm very happy that most people don't have that experience. But I used them a lot for that kind of thing, particularly when I first saw The Exorcist in the 1970s. That was the scariest thing in the universe at the time, apart from economic rationalism. And watching The Exorcist in an audience full of terrified people where you get all the pheromones of fear around you is an interesting experience. And that's why I brought out this. Mr. Londell's Groovy Movie says, that coffee cup is too tiny. It takes gallons of the stuff for me to get moving in the morning. I have really strong espressos. That stuff is the distilled essence of coffee. That is, I have 3 of those a day because my medical advisors tell me not to have any more. and that's enough to keep me at cruising altitude for the whole day. But back to horror movies, and I will get back to the chat, I promise. I got this thing. Now, this has been re-released on Blu-ray. Sam Katzman, 4 classic films on DVD. And the first horror movie I remember seeing is this one, The Zombies of Moratau, which is not scary at all. In real terms, in the real world, that's not scary. It's got slow zombies who are basically the sailors of a sunken ship protecting a treasure on the ship. It's low budget Sam Katzman stuff that was sold in syndication to Australian late night horror movie hosts. By the way, if I look out the window, I can see Luna climbing on the fence. She just jumped up on the ladder and she's rubbing up against the ladder now. So if people are wondering where Luna is, she is outside climbing on the fence and rubbing up against the ladder. But yeah, so Zombies of Moratau. This is a pretty good box set, by the way. It's got Giant Claw, Creature with the Atomic Brain, Zombies of Moratau, and the Werewolf. And yeah, I could have upgraded. There is a reasonable upgrade with a lot of extras, including art cards and things like that. But I'm kind of happy with that, and I don't see the need for a low budget Columbia Pictures Sam Katzman box set for me to upgrade that at this stage. But occasionally I'll dive into the Zombies of Moratau and just reminisce about how far I've come as a viewer of horror movies and how far and how different my reaction to horror is now to then. I'll do a bit of chat, but I've got some more thoughts on horror too. Thanks, Christopher. He watched the Foreman Project. Fantastic film. Love it. Alpha Wolf says, have been watching low budget movies that YouTube has been serving up to me. Lots of 70s, 80s movies I've never heard of. Yeah, there's a lot of that, but the thing is with the YouTube ones, and this is just a word to the wise, they cut out any of the good nudie bits. They're TV friendly versions of those movies because YouTube isn't very good with breasts. So you may want to find copies of some of those movies, particularly from the 70s and 60s and the 80s, in alternative means if you are into the gratuitous nudity. Roger Morgan says, recently got hold of No Blade of Grass. I've covered No Blade of Grass on an early video. Really good, directed by Cornell Wilde. Mr. Londell says, those are really fun movies. I've seen them all. The standout horror film for me was Ghost Stories. That stayed with me for years. Is that the one with Fred Astaire and those guys in it, based on the Peter Straub novel? Because that one does have some very hard moments. Time to crack one of the water bottles because I've got some water bottles here. So these days with horror, excuse me, these days with horror, I've got a very, very, very different approach to them. There are things like Umbrella Entertainment sent me their release of Martyrs, the French extreme horror movie from about a dozen years ago. That one is as hardcore as I want a horror movie to go. It's confronting. It's a superb movie. It's excellent. It's got a philosophy. It's got a twist. It's really a really interesting movie about transcendence as much as anything else. But the horror in it is really, really tough. And it's the kind of movie that a lot of people have the same reaction. It's a horror movie that you can acknowledge how good it is. You can acknowledge the horror and the impact it has on you while you're watching Martyrs. But it's one of those horror movies that you're not going to watch again because you don't want to go through the same experience you had the first time. And yet it is a superb movie. Lee says, this is a different one, early 2000s, definitely psychological horror. No Blade of Grass was one of the first films I saw on your recommendation. Thanks, Lee. Always happy for people to do that. If you watch any movie directed by Cornell Wilde, No Blade of Grass, Beach Red, or The Naked Prey, he was a primitivist. He really was into the brutality of violence. in a big way. KN says, I recommend Virgin Witch from 1972 for the best gratuitous nudity in the 70s British horror. Yeah, I've got that. I got the box set version of it with the novel inside it. Virgin Witch, which was, I think, a Pete Walker joint, if I'm not mistaken, was kind of combination of Hammer and a lot more nudity. Dean Johnson says David Cronenberg's body horror films are most squeamish to watch. Yeah, they are. Also, Brandon Cronenberg, his son, is making extreme movies. Things like Infinity Pool and Possessor are worth checking out as well. He's carrying the torch for the family in a really interesting way. Roger says, living through the video nasty era in the UK now, seeing those movies that were banned is quite an eye opener. Yeah, that video nasty thing was really weird. There used to be a thing here in Australia where the states had their own censorship things. And one of the selling points for horror movies when they came out on VHS was a sticker on them saying banned in Queensland, because Queensland had a very corrupt and very conservative government in the 70s and the 80s. And they banned a lot of stuff, like Night of the Living Dead was banned, and a whole bunch of those very mainstream horror movies of the time. And the banned in Queensland sticker was a badge of honour amongst horror movies. In fact, one of the box sets I got recently from Umbrella Entertainment has a little badge, an enamel pin that says banned in Queensland, because people still remember the banned in Queensland movies. Keith F says The Haunting, 1963. Yeah, I mean, that still has an impressive lot of horror in it. Interestingly enough, Robert Wise isn't a director I particularly like. I don't think he had a viewpoint in most things, but in that he did a really good job. And The Haunting is worth checking out. I may well add it for another video. If Middle-Aged Geek Girl is not too busy, can you write down The Haunting for me, because I do want to cover it in a future video. Franny says she saw The Haunting on 16mm age 12, scared the heck out of me. I'm not surprised. It does build an atmosphere and a creepiness, which a lot of, and I'm going to go off on a tangent here. Middle-aged good girl loves ghost tours. I don't. We have done 3 ghost tours over our life together. We did one in Edinburgh, in the vaults in Edinburgh. We did one in Hobart, on the streets of Hobart in Tasmania. And we did one in Pentridge Jail here in Melbourne. Bored the shit out of me. A couple of interesting things in each, usually the historical details. Like we went past the house where Errol Flynn was born in Hobart. But the ghost tours are just so much bullshit. I'm not going on anymore. If Middle-Aged Geek Girl wants to go, I'm happy for her to go with other people. But I'm totally over ghost tours. Yeah, Franny, Robert Wise is a non-auteur director. He was a working man. Middle-Aged Geek Girl says, I dislike slasher gore movies, but I love horror. There is a difference, absolutely. Lee says, not a film, but a science fiction series. Fringe has some pretty good moments of body horror. Yeah, I was actually putting the Blu-rays or DVDs I've got of Fringe on the bookshelf last night, and I thought I should re-watch Fringe. Yeah, it still creeps me out. Whose hand was I holding? Yeah. Roger says, I agree banning movies just made them more attractive and must see, although on watching some of them, you wonder why they were banned. Yeah, I had the same thing with Caligula. I found a banned version of Caligula, and Bob Guccione just didn't know how to film extreme adult entertainment in an interesting way. Kian says, yeah, I prefer atmosphere over extreme violence when it comes to horror movies. That's the thing with Martyrs, it does both. It gives you the double smack of having the atmosphere and also having the extreme horror. Kyle said, oh, hi, Kyle. Kyle says, the 1963 Haunting is one of the best novel to film adaptations. Highly recommend the book as well. Yeah, I agree. I don't know why Dean says, but 1973's Legend of Hill House always seemed to freak me out. Yeah, that's a good adaptation of the Richard Matheson novel as well. Roddy McDowell and Pamela Franklin. Yeah, that one works. Legend of Hell House, I really liked. I saw it in the cinemas when it came out, and the atmosphere just really worked. And the twist of the guy who is haunting the place is kind of interesting as well. Middle-aged geek girl says, "If you want me to go to movies, then you go on ghost tours." Simples. Well, given the fact that you only go to ghost tours once on average every 7 years, which is freaky in itself, that's not really fair. There's a new version of Clear coming out this Friday. Yeah, there is. I'm going to see whether I can get a copy of it. The original director doesn't like it. Yeah, sometimes they don't, but I think that I like to see the fullest version of any movie I can, and then I'll make the judgment about it. Christopher Scott says, "The Saw movies left me cold. Saw the first two, then gave up. I like the first one, and also James Wan and Lee Winnell are Australians, and then went over to America and made a low-budget horror movie that made all the money in the world, and a franchise that still continues to this day. So all credit to them that." Friday says about the Caligula extra stuff and 4K. Yeah, well, you can see a lot of people butts on 4K. Hi, Janet. Janet says Shirley Jackson's stories in general adapt to the film extremely well. Ever seen the short of her, The Lottery? I've seen a couple of versions of The Lottery, and they're both on YouTube, and they're both good. We got shown one at school on, I think it might have been on an 8 millimeter film, and that blew everybody away as well. A lot of stones got thrown at kids in the schoolyard after we saw that, so I think they stopped showing it to classes at my school. Lee says, Fringe is one of my favourite finds. Never heard of it until I saw Nimoy guest starred. Met John Noble a few years ago. Lovely guy. Yep. Nice little boy from Adelaide, John Noble. Sorry, got to hang there. D. Lee says, happy birthday when it comes, Terry. The 1930s Universal horror films know how to do scary without gore and guts. I'm not adverse to gore and guts. I think that the 1930s horror films were better before the production code came in. They got edgier. They got a lot kind of more confronting. And then when the censorship came in, they diminished it in some ways. I don't mind a bit of in your face gore. I don't mind a decapitated head and things like that. By the way, middle-aged geek girl, I think that Luna wants to come in. Kyle says, regarding Hell House, the reveal of why the ghost is so ticked off is hilarious. You can tell Roddy McDowell is having a blast through that whole flick. Yeah, I mean, Roddy does a pretty good role there about this, a psychic who is coded as being gay, as indeed Roddy was. And when he gets an attempted seduction by somebody who's possessed, you can see his discomfort in that scene. And Roddy had these moments of acting when he really showed his chops, and he really gave us much more than a lot of his TV work required of him. Dean says, just came across the Toho merch site that has Godzilla -1 apparel. By the way, happy birthday. That sounds cool. Godzilla -1 is just mind-blowingly good. I'm incredibly happy I saw that film. And I'm waiting for it to come out on physical media because it's one of those iconic films which hopefully will change the way giant monster movies are made in the future, because I think that there's an approach that it takes which goes back to the original 54 Godzilla, which I really admire in that it's a human story about an implacable force of nature, and the movie plays it that way. It's just a wonderful film. $20 million budget, incredible piece of work for this time. But yeah, let's continue. I found this one which is really odd. These things were about 15, 20 years ago. These things were all over the place. You could buy them in supermarkets. You could buy them in, $2 stores and things like that. It's called Great Horror Classics. 4 DVDs, 16 feature films. A lot of this stuff's public domain, but it's got things like Bride of the Gorilla, Edward's Bride of the Gorilla, and Attack of the Giant Leeches, and Night of the Blood Beast, which I've just talked about on the channel. Night of the Living Dead, Christmas Evil, Don't Look in the Basement, House on Haunted Hill, which is in every one of these ones. Werewolf in the Girls' Dormitory. These are really interesting box sets that got put out because the movies were in the public domain. And the thing I like about this one particularly, Dean Johnson says, Godzilla -1, black or white or color. I've only seen the color version. I haven't seen the black and white one. I'd go with either. The story will carry it. But there's this photoshopped horror thing of a snake centaur, which has nothing to do with any of the movies. But I kind of like the fact that it's there. And it's so kind of turn of the 21st century. I kind of like that. And so I like this box set. It really typifies an era of physical media. And it's got a couple of movies I haven't got in other forms. So I keep that one. But yeah, horror movies. We used to have late night horror movie hosts, like a lot of places did here in Australia. And so you'd see Deadly Ernest or somebody else. There was on one of the cable services around the turn of the 21st century, there was a woman called Tabitha who showed horror movies as well and kind of did an Australian version of Elvira, and she was quite fun doing these, doing the intros to these horror movies. So I think that there's a lot of room for more and more horror movie hosts. In fact, there are some of them on YouTube as well. But to get back to the box sets, and here's the one that's been previously mentioned. I got this one particularly for one of these movies. Studio Classics, a 20th Century Fox box set, which has The Alligator People, The Cabinet of Caligari, the one from the 1960s with Dan O'Herlihy and Glynis Johns, The Fly, and House of the Damned, which I think may be a Hammer film. So that one I got. I already had The Fly, Alligator People, and The Cabinet of Caligari is what I got this for. And it's a pretty good box set. They're all on individual discs. And if you haven't seen Cabinet of Caligari, you should check it out. So there it is. There's Alligator People in there. The Fly. Interesting image for The Fly. And why is this one on backwards? And the other two movies are on a double-sided disc there, which is a bit of a shame, which I'm going to have to put back correctly. But yeah, this one is slightly unusual. And I had to find it on Amazon because it wasn't available anywhere here in Australia. But I really wanted the Cabinet of Caligari, and I've got it for that reason. But I've also got the, if you saw my video with my day bills, I've got the day bill of the Cabinet of Caligari. Really interesting variation. Very different from the original version. But yeah, it's a lot of fun to just find these obscurities. D. Lee says Roddy McDowell was an oddity called Lord Love a Duck with Tuesday World. Yeah, I've got that. I actually talked about it. I don't know whether I did a full review, but I talked about it on a previous video. Yeah, Lord Love a Duck is just a mad thing, directed by George Axelrod. If you haven't seen Lord Love a Duck, you should find a copy of it because it is kind of mad. And Roddy McDowell playing a university student, even though a high school student. Roddy McDowell playing a high school student when he was in his 30s. Really weird thing. Roger says, love Romero's Dawn of the Dead, but what version do I watch? There's loads of them. I don't mind which one. I haven't really dived deeply into the early Romero stuff lately. There's so much other stuff to get through, and it's kind of weird that people, Romero, of course, resurrected the zombie movies. He didn't do fast zombies the way the 28 Days Later did. but he put a social context to zombie movies, which is why he is so well regarded, and rightly so. But Keith says the Cabinet of Caligari gets poor IMDb reviews, but I liked it. Interesting direction, absolutely. Would I recommend The Curse from 1988? It's a really good adaptation of Lovecraft's The Color Out of Space. I haven't seen it. I hear good things. A few people I respect really like The Curse, but I haven't seen it yet. Middle-aged Geeko, can you write down The Curse 1988 for me? Because I may well dive into that and give it a bit of love. So moving on to the more horror. This one's on 2 discs, which is a bit of a shame. But it was the only, and I'm sorry about the loud clicking there. But these were the versions of a lot of these films that I could get. William Castle Horror Collection. 13 Ghosts, 13 Frightened Girls, Mr. Sardonicus, Homicidal, and The Old Dark House. That's a nice box set. I'm happy with that. 13 Ghosts you gotta love. Mr. Sardonicus I loved. Homicidal, which is his William Castle's version of Psycho, and an adaptation of The Old Dark House. Nice little set. I've got a couple of William Castle box sets now, and they're always a bit of fun. Always have the tongue firmly in their cheek. But those had a few. This one had a few that I hadn't copies of, so I got that a fair while back, and it's worth checking out if you haven't already. Janet says, Ned, this time. Okay, hi Ned. The 2 Basil Dearden films you did recommended me of 3 Cases of Murder, especially the one in the painting that pulls the victims into it. Happy birthday from Spain. Thank you very much, Ned. Friday says, The Curse was the best Lovecraft movie made at the time and for a few years. Is it better than the Dunwich Horror? Which I love because Dean Stockwell just goes so totally over the top while he's trying to get a Lovecraftian monster to eat Sandra Dee. What is all that stuff behind me, says Dean. Well, over there I've got records. Over there I've got miscellaneous junk. In this little, hang on, in this little box, I've got adult novels. I've got a couple of daybills there. I've got a model of the Submariner there, and just miscellaneous stuff. In the crates down here, I've got all of my CDs because I haven't worked out where I'm putting the CDs yet. So there's lots of stuff. And over on this side, I've just created a workstation and a desk, which is for my Xbox One and my PlayStation 4. I'm hooking them up to one monitor and I'm going to have it right there for me to play whenever I like. Roger says, prefer the original Castle movies to the CGI messy remakes. I don't think it was the CGI that made them bad, Roger. I think it's the fact that the plots and the scripts were just bad. They didn't take the best of what those movies were when they remade them and then elaborate on them. They just, rubber stamped them in a sense. Friday says, oh, I love the Dunwich Horror, but the Curse is more accurate Lovecraftian feels. And Alpha Wolf says, the Dunwich Horror is barely watchable. I love the Dunwich Horror. I just think it's so totally over the top. Cheers, Euler Greg. But yeah, I mean, I kind of like AIP horror movies. I don't think they're ever the scariest horror movies. I don't think they're ever the best horror movies. But AIP horror movies always had the vivid colors. They did all of those Roger Corman Poe adaptations and a bit of Lovecraft thrown in there for good measure. And I kind of like the vividness and the boldness with which they were made. That saturated Technicolor just works well for a certain kind of horror movie. Morning, Damien. What the hell are you doing up this time of the morning? Get yourself a coffee, mate. Yeah, AIP films are just always fun. I even like the beach party movies. I wonder if I should invest in a box set of beach party movies because I like those as well. D. Lee says, so there is someone with a living space as crammed as mine. This is just a man cave. The other rooms are much better for the most part because I've got to share them with middle-aged geek girl. But the man cave is cluttered. It's going to become less cluttered over time. I've got some plans, and I'm divesting myself of some stuff that I no longer need or use. But I'm slowly working away. It used to be a lot worse. And the worst of it is in this area that you can see. Some of the other areas are a lot better, as middle-aged geek girl would attest to. Roger says, love old Vincent Price classics like The Haunted Palace. Yeah, Vincent Price, even though he was stereotyping himself to do a certain kind of campy role, I think he was always good value in that. Also, why does everybody just mispronounce Dunwich? It should be pronounced like Greenwich, i.e. Dunwich. Yeah, but Dunwich doesn't sound as good as Dunwich. Beach parties, yeah, I mean, beach party movies are great. And people like Vincent Price turned up in there. Buster Keaton turned up in them as well. Whole bunch of really good actors and Mickey Rooney. So yeah, beach party movies are just a lot of fun, and they're kind of vulgar pleasures. James Brown turned up in a beach party movie. You gotta love that. This one I like because it's mostly crime movies, but also a bit of horror chucked in. The Icons of Suspense collection, Hammer Films. That one. 6 edge of your seat classics. Stop Me Before I Kill. Cash on Demand with Peter Cushing, which is fantastic. The Snorkel, Maniac, the really mind-blowingly good Never Take Candy from a Stranger, which is one of the first movies to really address pedophilia, and These Are the Damned, also known as The Damned. This is a fantastic box set, and I like it a lot. It's got 2 movies on each disc, but I still like it. I think there are things like Maniac, which was filmed down in the Camargue in the south of France. It's got Donald Houston in it and Kerwin Matthews. Really interesting crime thriller with some horror aspects to it as well. But it uses the locations down on that part of the south of France, which is not the touristy part of the south of France, in really interesting ways. I just love the fact that they went there and did that. And Maniac's definitely an underrated Hammer movie. Let me know if you want me to do a video about that because I will. Keith F says Cash on Demand is a finely acted movie, but hey, it's Peter Cushing. Yeah, it's also Andre Morel and with Peter Cushing and Andre Morel playing the bad guy. That I like a lot. It's also a variation on A Christmas Carol in a weird kind of way. Damien says he has those movies as part of an indicator set. Crescendo, that's one weird Hammer trip. Haven't seen Crescendo for a very long time, and I don't remember much about it, but I probably should revisit it. Hammer is just one of those things that keeps giving us good stuff, and more stuff becomes available. And you kind of go, yeah, they weren't just Christopher Lee biting people on the neck or Peter Cushing creating dead monsters. Friday says Dr. Goldfoot movies are the best, described as an acquired taste. Yeah, they are. When I did one of my 24-hour marathons back in the day, and it's on the channel if you look up under the 24-hour movie marathon playlist, towards the end of the 24 hours, I did both Dr. Goldfoot movies. And they did my head in because I was getting really tired at that stage of the 24-hour movie marathon. And Dr. Goldfoot movies kind of bored me and pissed me off at the same time, but I kind of liked them. I was going through a whirlwind of emotion with those movies at the time. KN says 88 films are reissuing old horror movies on Blu-ray and 4K. Blood on Satan's Claw, I've got that already. Witchfinder General, cool, I like it. Beast in the Cellar and The Body Stealers. The Body Stealers is a very weird movie. If they've got a good copy of it, I'd be very tempted. Keith F says Cushing and Morel were also terrific in Hound of the Baskervilles. Yeah, I like Andre Morel in anything. I think that he was really underestimated as an actor, and he wasn't put always into the best material. Curse of the Zombies is a good example. His character could have carried a series of movies about the supernatural, but that wasn't the case. Damien says, "I'm up feeding furries, setting up the table, getting up and his dad up for his something I can't see. Sorry, to give Heather a break." Okay, Damien, and you're doing good work there, mate. I mean, I know what you guys are dealing with at the moment, and yeah, all strength to you, mate. So I'm going to take a break from the horror. I will come back to it, but now's the time for the Ask Me Anything. Ask me a question. If you want to donate a super chat to boost it a bit, you can, but it's not mandatory. But ask me a question for the next 20 minutes or so. We'll do an AMA. Roger says Plague of the Zombies was a different take on, and it made you feel sorry for the zombies. Yeah, the zombies were the victim. John Carson's character was the real villain in that. Kayan says, do you have it to okay the 24 movie marathons with the doctor before I start? I did them before I kind of had the atrial fibrillation. I could possibly do them again, but I'd have to kind of prepare myself for it. And also, there's a lot of reorganizing of household routines I've got to do for a 24-hour movie marathon. I might do it in two 12-hour chunks because with health issues, it does get a little problematic these days to do a 24-hour. I could probably do it, but I've got to kind of be careful with certain things, particularly diet and particularly staying hydrated, because my atrial fibrillation, which is an irregular heartbeat, gets triggered by too much salt in my diet and also dehydration. So I've kind of got to balance more things than I used to with that kind of stuff. Damien says, I love what you do with the shelves. Yeah, the shelves are great. I'm really happy with them. I've got one more to put in the back room, but I've got to rearrange some things before I do. And then I might do a bit of a tour. Kayan says it should be retitled Very Small Plague of the Zombies. Yep. And Keith says, what time do I have to get up to prepare for the early morning live streams? Well, this one started at 8 o'clock my time because daylight saving has just died. And so we got up at 7. I had a shower, I got prepared, had some breakfast. So it's not too bad. I've looked at the stats on YouTube and I've kind of geared the launch times for my other videos and the start of the live streams for when I have the most people watching the channel. And that's usually around 8 o'clock my time in the morning, which is in the evening for most people in most parts of the world. So not really an arduous thing to get up and prepare. I do a lot of the prep, including finding the videos the night before. So there is a lot of stuff you can front load on these things. I've got a rough idea of what I want to talk about, and the rest of it I just kind of wing it. Roger Morgan says, best Hammer Dracula movie, I prefer the first. Yeah, the first one's pretty good, and it is a kind of truncated adaptation of the novel. I've got a vulgar fondness for, even though it's not directly a Dracula movie, for vampire lovers, because I really enjoy Ingrid Pitt, and Lust for a Vampire, which is just silly as hell. I like Brides of Dracula, even though it isn't a Dracula movie per se, because Peter Cushing gets to do some really athletic stunt work as he's fighting Count Meinster, the bad guy in that one. George, greetings from Liverpool. Have I done a show on Mad Max movies? And have I seen the trailer for the upcoming Furiosa movie? Haven't done a show on the Mad Max movies. I could possibly do it in the future. The original Mad Max was filmed, 10 minutes drive away from here. Some of those back roads are just out past where I live and in the Little River. And also when I do the Booktown videos where I go to Clunes Booktown, parts of Mad Max were filmed in Clunes as well. They're interesting films. I think they're basically Westerns adapted. And yes, I have seen the Furiosa trailer, and I'm going to see that as well For a start, it doesn't have any Mel Gibson in it, and I find Mel Gibson increasingly problematic. And Anya Taylor-Joy is a really fine actress. It's got Hemsworth doing a different kind of role, which I really appreciate him stepping out of the heroic mode into doing something else. So yeah, even though it is a prequel to Mad Max Fury Road, which is still good, I like a number of things about this, particularly the fact that they brought it back here and it's filmed in Australia because, at its heart, underneath everything else, Mad Max is an Australian story. That's how Australia handles the apocalypse. Even though there, there were I think Fury Road was filmed in Namibia because we had a sudden lot of rain and all the deserts started blooming and they didn't look right for making it. In fact, middle-aged Geek Girl and I were out at Silverton and Broken Hill, where the second and third Mad Max movies were filmed. And there were location scouts for Fury Road out there at the time. And they were trying to find somewhere that wasn't too green to film the movie, and they weren't able to do so. Ian says, I'm a big fan of British horror films from the late 50s to 70s, but to be honest, I don't think there's a perfect 10 film in the whole bunch. No, they're definitely more vulgar pleasures in a sense. It's they were made by the lower end of the market because America tended to swamp the content in the UK particularly, and there wasn't a lot of money around. So things like Hammer and Amicus and Tygon were the ones who were willing to invest in the not very classy movies like horror movies and to a certain extent science fiction as well. So they were done on the cheap, they were done quickly. They were done with a whole bunch of actors you could find by scouring the bars of Curzon Street. Uh, yeah, they're not the best movies of all time, but they're the movies people saw when they were young, and they're the movies that have an emotional resonance for people because of that nostalgia. And they're a lot of fun. D. Lee says Caravan of Garbage are currently doing the Mad Max films. They did the first one recently. Yeah, cool. I find them a little unstructured. Caravan of Garbage doesn't edit out a lot of the stuff. They just have the voiceovers and they waffle a bit. I'm known to waffle, but there is an editing process there that I think they should make available to themselves a lot more. Should have been more Hammer Van Helsing and definitely more Captain Kronos Vampire Hunter. Yeah, I'm not sure Horst Janssen was the most charismatic of actors. I don't know whether it was because English wasn't his first language. But getting a decent swashbuckling actor in to make Captain Kronos movies would have been a good idea. Jenna says, I would put Quatermass in the pit as an almost 10. Yeah, I mean, Nigel Neal's script was good on that. Andrew Keir, Barbara Shelley, all of those people in the cast make it work. And Hammer treated the genre seriously, which I really appreciated. Kiss of the Vampire was like, I filmed that 79. Yeah, I'm doing it fine. Got a little bit of a blocked nose because the seasons are turning here. What's my favourite science fiction film and why? Says Franny. Mine is The Day the Earth Stood Still, the original one. And the reason is a message in the film. Yeah, good choice. Got a few. I love Forbidden Planet. Forbidden Planet is a 1950s science fiction pulp brought to life. And it's MGM taking the genre seriously. I think that's great. And the genius idea of adapting Shakespeare's The Tempest to a science fiction matrix is really good. I just love the way it works. And I love the way that we never find out what the Krell look like. That's one of them. I also like Gattaca, Andrew Nicole's Gattaca, because Gattaca is a science fiction movie about ideas and about people. And at the core of it is the human being and somebody overcoming their shortcomings and also the shortcomings imposed on them by their society. I think Gattaca is a really underrated science fiction movie. and it has a lot going for it. And the acting is all universally good and really appropriate to the level of the movie. It's not an action film, it's a film about character, and I love that. Friday says, Forbidden Planet was my second. D. Lee says, Night of the Demons up there. It's a horror movie, it's not a science fiction movie. But I agree with you, it's great. Speaking of Hammer, says Film Nut, The Devil Rides Out will always be a favourite. Yeah, I've read the novel as well. I've got a few Dennis Wheatley novels here. Really good stuff, and even though it has an incredible Christian bias about it, I think that Christopher Lee did fantastically as the Richelieu. And the special effects work quite well as well for a fairly limited budget. Just looking through the chat now. Yeah, I should rewatch The Devil Rides Out. I've got the Blu-ray. A whole bunch of Hammer films came out on Blu-ray about 10 or 15 years ago here. And there are a few extras on them, but the transfers are all beautiful. And a lot of these are starting to um, come out again on newer editions. But for me, I don't really see a need for me to upgrade them. It'd be nice to have like a complete Hammer box set of horror movies that wide, with extras and lobby cards and all that kind of gear. It'd be very attractive to have that, but I don't think it's necessary for what I'm doing. And one of the things I was thinking of doing is, rather than keeping things alphabetical, I've got my box set separate, but I've got the rest of the movies alphabetical. I may grab out all the Hammer ones and just do a shelf of Hammer movies, and maybe Amicus as well, just to keep them in one place. Haven't quite decided whether I'm going to or not, but with the new shelving, I've got a bit of an opportunity there to do that. Back to horror for a little bit. These are underestimated as both horror and science fiction. TV stuff. But a couple of these episodes scared the shit out of me when I was a kid. And yeah, Devil Rides Out. One of the actors had a dub voice in The Devil Rides Out, Keith. That was done a lot at the time because actors just didn't have the right accent or the right tone for certain things. But these ones I like a lot, and I'm going to dive more into them. And they did have that crossover between horror and science fiction. The Outer Limits. Got the two box sets of that, which I just love. In fact, I love The Outer Limits more than I love The Twilight Zone. I think The Outer Limits is the bastard brother of The Twilight Zone, which is more didactic and more philosophical. But I like the Monster of the Week, and I like the fact that there were so many good actors in the Outer Limits episodes. When Cliff Robertson and the Galaxy being at the start with the Architects of Fear with Culp, The Sixth Finger with David McCallum, The Man Who Never Was with Martin Landau. All of that kind of stuff really worked for me. The Mutant with Warren Oates in it. Yeah, Demon with a Glass Hand as well, and Soldier with Michael Ansara, the two Harlan Ellison episodes. For me, more than The Twilight Zone, I love The Outer Limits because for some reason it punched harder. It didn't have the emotional heartstrings the way that some of the Twilight Zone episodes did. And I think having Rod Serling doing the intros and the outros, which is a kind of leftover from the 50s, at times takes you out of the story, where Rod Serling just walks into the set and breaks the fourth wall immediately. I think that diminished the impact of a lot of the Twilight Zone stuff. Of course, he was branding himself. Works better in the Night Gallery because there's actually a better frame, no pun intended, in the Night Gallery. But in the Twilight Zone, very often Rod Serling took us out of the narrative in a lot of ways. Barry says, the Sandy Misfits scared the absolute crap out of me as a kid. Yeah, stop motion monsters, but they were somehow really effective. And there were a lot of those cheap but effective special effects in a lot of the Twilight Zone. Sorry, a lot of the Outer Limits. Roger says the Outer Limits. Now you're talking monsters. Were called the Bear in the scripts. Yeah, they were. Love Six Finger and the Man Who Was Never Born and Children of Spider County. Yeah. The Man with the Power with Donald Pleasance. Yep. The Dark Room with James Coburn is also highly underrated. I haven't seen that one. Soldier is the episode Ellison claimed the Terminator borrowed a bit from. It did, KM. In fact, Harlan Ellison made bank from suing studio for the Terminator and got an acknowledgement finally put into the credits of it. He wasn't scared to call out plagiarism where it occurred, and he did so, and rightly so. Like you said, pay the writer. Time for me to do the birthday haul. Now, here's how it works in our house, and this sometimes pisses off middle-aged geek girl. We get a budget for birthday stuff, and we buy our own birthday stuff, which is kind of okay. But I didn't tell her I was going to do this when I ordered this stuff. This is an indicator box set of horror movies which aren't particularly long. And I knew nothing about the guy who stars and produced them. It's The Criminal Acts of Todd Slaughter, who did a whole bunch of blood and thunder kind of entertainments in the 1930s and 1940s. And somehow Indicator have put them all together. There he is there, fruity looking cove. And there are a couple of things I like about this. This is kind of like the Mexico Macabre in that the covers are cardboard. And there are tons of extras in them. I haven't watched these yet, but I will. Version of Sweeney Todd there, without the singing and definitely without Johnny Depp's weak tenor voice. And those ones. And this being Indicator, you get a book about him as well. Hang on. Helps if I hold it up in front of the camera. With a whole bunch of essays. Is part of the crew of one of these things. Like I said, I knew nothing about this guy, so I got this one speculatively. And it's one of those things where I always tend to go for the stuff I know nothing about and try to find new things and try to stay fresh by finding new things. But I'm going to have fun diving into those ones and just seeing what they are and accepting them at the level they are. Really like the fact that I got that way. And then there's something new to me. Let's look at the chat. Damien says, I was thinking about this set, never heard of this guy. Neither had I. Richard Hart says, accidentally bumped into the Outer Limits on the BBC late one night back in 1980. Yeah, that's how most people find it. I saw it when it was first out because my uncles let me stay up and watch it when I was staying at my grandparents' place where they lived. Keith F says, oh my God, Todd Slaughter, aptly named for what he did to movie making. Yeah. Friday says, I didn't like the newer version of The Outer Limits as it seems strongly anti-science. There are some good episodes of the new Outer Limits, but fewer than there should have been. Keith F says, I saw The Outer Limits in the 1960s. Yeah, Roger, the new Outer Limits was hit and miss. Now, the other box set I got for my birthday is the second collection of the Eurocrypt of Christopher Lee, which is a great box set. D. Lee says, I like Todd Slaughter films. They were horror thriller genre unto themselves. Okay, the Something of William Hart is based on Burke and Hare. Cool. But yeah, this one. Weird obscurities from the career of Christopher Lee, all of which were filmed in Europe. Except this one. This was Christopher Lee, Joan Collins, Herbert Lom, Jane Birkin, Dark Places. Directed by Don Sharp, who was an Australian, by the way. Know nothing about this one. But like the rest of them, tons of extras. There's the back. There's the back of them. So we've got that. Dracula and Son, Christopher Lee and Bernard Metz, which is apparently a comedy one. This feels heavy. Has it got more than one disc in it? It's got a bunch of different versions of it, and there's 3 discs in there, which is kind of weird. But there's that one. Christopher Lee Murder Story plus a full-length feature, Mask of Murder. Again, I'm going to go on to these ones cold. I don't know anything about them. Uncle Was a Vampire. Christopher Lee, Renato Mascal, and Silva Coscina, who I like a lot. Again, a comedy one. Don't know anything about it, but I'm going to go in and enjoy it. 2 versions of it, the uncut Italian theatrical version and the cullioned version. And The Secret of the Red Orchid, starring Christopher Lee and Klaus Kinski, which looks like it might be a crimi film. That's kind of interesting. Yeah, it is a crimi. It says, a wonderfully outrageous crimi with Christopher Lee. I didn't know he did a crimi film. So there's that, plus Christopher Lee, A Career in 6 Snapshots with Jonathan Rigby, who knows a lot about the careers of Christopher Lee. So I'm looking forward to diving into this one as well. And these box sets, the first one of the Eurocrypt of Christopher Lee was a lot of fun. There was a German version of The Hound of the Baskervilles, I think it was, which nobody had ever seen in English language areas. But it was pretty damn good. But that one, really going to dive into and enjoy and just watch for the fun of watching it. And this was by Severin Films. Cost a fair bit. I won't be shy about that. But because I had the first one, I wanted to get the second one. It was a shame. It was the same with the Shore Scope movies. I put away my pennies because the Shore Scope Wuxia films, the first box set of that was fantastic. And the second box set was just as good. Let's see. D. Lee says, I like Todd Slaughter films. No, I've already said that. Janet, or maybe not, says, love the original Outer Limits. There was always a disturbing sexual subtext going on in some of them. One of my favourites is The Guests with its jelly brain creature. Yeah, there were some good bears in that one. Damien says, Lee loves taking off his Dracula. Yeah. Keith F. said, did you know Christopher Lee made a few heavy metal albums? Yeah. But I'm not particularly a fan of heavy metal. Middle Age Geek Girl says, I'm glad I got them for you. Yes, I know, but I appreciate them, and I appreciate my other birthday present. Friday says, what's people's most favourite obscure movies? Mine is Curse of the Queer Wolf by Mark Pirro. I like Mark Pirro stuff. I've seen a couple of his films. Favourite obscure movies? I kind of like the Ginger trilogy with Sherry Cafaro, directed by Don Shane, who was her husband. She plays a secret agent called Ginger McAllister. And there are 3 movies. There's Ginger, there's The Abductors, and there's Girls Are for Loving, which are kind of like sexed up female James Bond films from the 1970s. I don't know whether the originals are there, whether anyone's going to put out a decent copy of them. Most of the versions I've seen, apart from having seen 2 of them in the cinema at the time, are VHS transfers. But the Ginger trilogy is my vulgar pleasure. Richard Hart says, I have never heard of any of these Christopher Lee films. When did the man ever find time to sleep? On aeroplanes going from Europe to England, obviously. Roger Morgan could listen to Lee's reading of M.R. James' ghost stories all night long. Yeah, he was great. Friday says, Christopher Lee did 1 opera and 1 symphonic metal album. Cinema Dave, hope you have a great birthday. Thanks a lot, Dave. And people should check out Cinema Dave Media and his YouTube channel as well, because Dave does a lot of good stuff. And he also does some great crossovers with his friend Stephanie. Keith F says, for obscure, Queen of Spades. Yep, I got the Blu-ray of Queen of Spades a while back. And Queen of Spades has such a great atmosphere. And it's got Anton Walbrook in it, of course, so it is good. Shot on a really small soundstage, and they really make it feel a lot bigger than it is. But yeah, Queen of Spades, people should definitely check out. What other obscurities? There's an Australian political film from the 80s called Goodbye Paradise with Ray Barrett in it, which I really like. It's a satire about an attempted coup d'etat in Queensland. And there's a lot of kind of political subtext at the time, but it's got crazy, witty dialogue in it, and it's just such a lot of fun. Umbrella Entertainment put it out, but they could only find a 3.2, 3:2 aspect ratio version of it. But it's still worth picking up if you can find a copy of Goodbye Paradise. KN says, I have Dark Places. I hope the rest of the film is when he's on the screen for 5 minutes. Well, I don't know. I'll find out. Grantman71, have a great birthday. Could they make a movie like Bad Ronald today? They can make any kind of movie today. It's just whether it be accepted by an audience or not. Simmer Dave says, solar eclipse here tomorrow. I'm in the path of totality where I live, and so it's very exciting. Yeah, enjoy it. There are a lot of apocalyptic things being said about that eclipse, Dave. The crazies are coming out in force, which is both disturbing and of course, a lot of fun. But enjoy the eclipse. You're going to get any footage around the eclipse for your channel, because that'd be kind of interesting to do. But yeah, I've seen partial eclipses, but I've never seen a totality. Where I live just hasn't had them lately. Keith F says, here's an obscure movie that isn't particularly great. Full Circle starring Mia Farrow. Let's see. I'll look that up. It's coming up also as The Haunting of Julia, which I think may have had a release on imprint, if I recall correctly. I'm just looking it up. Scream Factory did a 4K on it, which was released last year. Yeah, The Haunting of Julia is the name of it is on this one. And I'm fairly certain, let me just do The Haunting of Julia on imprint. Yep, imprint collection number 218. Not one I've got, but it's got there's a slipcase and double-sided sleeve art, and the CD soundtrack is on the imprint version of it. And imprint always have region-free discs, which is kind of interesting. I'll post a link to it if people want it. Then Dave says, yes, we'll be making a video, hopefully. I hope it goes well. Hope you and Jesse have fun with the eclipse too, Dave. Roger Morgan says, when is the Sentinel a bit obscure with the video nasty list over here? Yeah, I saw the Sentinel a while back. Damien says there's an Australian film called Demonstration made in the early 70s. Saw it once in the late 70s on TV along with the set. I've got the set. I've actually got the novel as well. But the set's a nice obscure one. Kean says, would Craze with Jack Palance be considered obscurish? It is. And oddly enough, I've seen it in the cinema. I watched it in the cinema, Jack Palance and some kind of voodoo idol, as I recall. I've got a copy of it on DVD. But yeah, it's a bit mad, that one. Set in London. And yeah, Craze is worth checking out if you're into obscure, slightly what the hell horror movies. Grandma says, any interest in Omen movies? You got them all on DVD? Not particularly. Yeah, I'm not into that Antichrist kind of stuff, because for me, Antichrist is somebody who supports rainbow rights and universal guaranteed income and things like that. There's a lot of right-wing conspiracy stuff about Antichrist. And I wasn't that impressed with The Omen. I know a lot of people like it, and I respect that. But it's a very kind of mainstream horror film in that sense. Big studio, big stars. Did a couple of gore effects that were sub-Hammer horror films level of gore. It's an interesting thing that those movies were so big as they were, probably because of The Exorcist and how incredibly successful that was. Big studios started doing horror, but they didn't have the balls to do real horror. They did kind of not family friendly, but mainstream friendly horror. And I think The Omens are part of that. Hi, Sammy. Thank you very much. Birthday's on the 17th, Wednesday next week. And yep, I'm so old that I've still got my ears ringing from the Big Bang. But I'm having fun, and it's going to be a great week. Friday says, and the theme for The Visitor is great. Yeah. My favourite theme at the moment, the one that I've seen most recently that I really like, is the theme to Bluebeard, the one with Richard Burton in it, that Umbrella, was it Umbrella? Yeah, the Umbrella put out recently. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Umbrella. It's got an Ennio Morricone screen theme with it. And it sounds like part of the theme was done on kazoo. Probably wasn't, but it sounds a lot like kazoo. And that's really my favorite at the moment, because it's got the right tone for that campy, crazy murder movie where Raquel Welch plays a nun who ends up marrying Bluebeard. And just there's so many great soundtracks of the 70s that don't get enough love. Zammy Adams said, just got back from watching The Holy Mountain at the cinema. Yeah, Holy Mountain and El Topo, one of the great double features. Hodorowski was a weird filmmaker, and in the best possible way. I think I saw The Holy Mountain. Yeah, I did, in the cinema, and it blew my mind. I didn't understand it because I was like 17 at the time, but I did find it compelling. Kayan said, I would recommend Mumsy, Nanny, Sonny and Girly. Very quirky British horror film from 1970, directed by Freddie Francis. I've heard about that, and it's kind of been roughly on my radar for a fair while. Keith says, recently watched Richard Burton in The Robe, a pile of doo-doo. Yeah, it is shit. Richard Burton did great films. He did not so great films. The Holy Mountain is insane. Mumsy is a great film. 10 out of 10, says Zammy Adams. Friday says, Zola, Jesus, love the Stridulum as much they made an EP of music. Yeah. There's so much stuff from the 70s that still hasn't been released. Christopher Scott says, speaking of Richard Burton, I have a soft spot for the Medusa touch, probably because I love a happy ending. Yeah, lots of rich people getting crushed by a church. Hi, Lagasateca. Thank you very much. Yeah, the Medusa touch was also put out by Imprint, and I've got a copy of it, finally. It's got a strident tone to it, that movie, and such a misanthropic lead character. It really has a weird mood. Grantman71 says, thank you for turning me on to the Japanese movies and manga stuff. I think it really took off in Australia than where I am in Canada. Yeah, we really embraced a lot of the tokusatsu stuff and the anime stuff here in Australia in the early age because it became available in syndication. And a lot of the TV channels were looking for cheap product at the time because the budgets and the cash flow of TV stations here wasn't great. So they were looking for weird stuff to just fill time. And they very often found it. Sammy Adams says, Equus is a great Burton flick. Yeah, it's one of the last good roles that Burton did, along with him in 1984, which I think he does really well. Once he escaped the kind of media frenzy about him and Elizabeth Taylor, Burton really did some fine stuff. And he's a distant relative of mine too. He's my mother's second cousin, Richard Burton. And I always liked his stuff. And I love that beautiful, rich, deep Welsh voice of his. Just the best stuff. And him, I think he did a version of Under Milkwood, which I really appreciated. Kayan says, I watched Soylent Green recently, set in 2022. They were almost right. I don't know about you, but I'm not into cannibalism. And it's not quite that crowded where I live. Damien says, all good actors appeared in bad films. Absolutely. And a lot of them made them better because they were good actors. Richard says, the Medusa touch was canon films before there were canon films. Yeah. Keith says, I watched a Burton movie recently, black and white in the 50s. He played a prisoner, was about 8th in the cast list. Can't remember the name of it, but it wasn't bad at all. Yeah, Burton was one of those guys who, once he did Cleopatra, and there was that big fuss about him and Elizabeth Taylor, they became the most watched celebrities in the world for a few years there in the 1960s until people worked out that the movies they were making together, like Boom and the comedians, weren't that great. Really fine actor. Um, it was a weird thing, and I'm not sure that anybody's ready for celebrity at that level. Same way Sean Connery wasn't ready for the celebrity of James Bond. Those media frenzies around Burton and Taylor were really extreme. But yeah, the Medusa touch is good. Equus, I want somebody to put out a good Australian release of Equus. I think that's definitely worth having. Spyro came in from the cold. That was a bleak movie. Yeah. One of the great early Le Carre adaptations. And Burton, again, really doing well in a movie that was shot in black and white, really nailed the character and gave us that. Also, the other things he did that were fantastic, like Villain with Ian McShane, where he plays Vic Dakin, a gay gangster in London in the 1970s. Villain is a fantastic movie and a really hardcore British crime film. Super 7 Sandra Westmore, hi. Have you ever seen the great 1970 movies The Week Then, like Jewel and Night Stalker? Yeah, I've seen a number of them. There's just so many good ones. And there are some good genre ones as well, some weird obscurities. There's one where Barbara Eden gets knocked up by an alien. In spite of the censorship and limitations of American TV, there were movies of the week that really did interesting stuff. Weird stuff like a Theodore Sturgeon adaptation of Killdozer with Clint Walker about a bulldozer on an island that gets taken over by an alien force. Weird stuff, and but great. Just way above the level that you'd expect for that kind of a forum. Friday says, "Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf is brutal to watch, and the acting is so good." Yeah, the ensemble just rip into each other. It just works really well. Grandma says, "I tend to like early Coen Brothers stuff like Dead, like, Blood Simple." I think you mean getting too mainstream for my taste now. Yeah, maybe, but I kind of like any Coen Brothers. I really like Hail Caesar. That was a lot of fun. Art house movie called Red with Gabriella Drake as a witch being tortured. Never seen in the 70s. Maybe I dreamt it. Who knows? Kayan says, Duel is one of Spielberg's best. Yeah, he was hungry at that stage. The Jack Palance Dracula is worth Duel, the Night Stalker. I've got Night Stalker and Night Strangler. I think Kino Lorber put it out on Blu-ray. Both of those films. I remember putting them on the shelf last night when I was filling the new shelves. And I'm really glad I've got them as well as the Night Stalker TV series. Yeah, Damien, Trilogy of Terror is great as well. I've got Trilogy of Terror on disc, and that one is really interesting. And I've also got a Zuni fetish doll, which unfortunately broke, and its head is off. So I'm going to have to do some major surgery on my Zuni fetish doll, but I've got one full size, which I should repair to put on display again. Janet says, "Oh, Ned, maybe." TV flick The House of Green Apple Road has a grisly opening. It was a bit of a shocker. Keith says the truck driver had an attitude problem in Duel. That's possible. Or maybe he was just in a hurry. Grantman 71, Burnt Offerings with Karen Black. Yeah, did that have Ollie Reed in it as well? I'm not sure. What about Gargoyles? Yeah, with Cornel Wilde and Bernie Casey. Gargoyles works. In fact, it keeps turning up on YouTube. There's a whole bunch of different Gargoyles iterations of that movie. And yeah, it should have been theatrical production because I think that the makeup and special effects work well for that. There's another one, a kind of zombie movie set in the 30s with Ray Milland, I think, and George Hamilton called The Dead Don't Die, which is worth finding if you can. What do I think of the Movo song by Leo Carax? Could be considered a science fiction movie. Let me just check that. Because I'm not familiar with it. Bad Blood. I'm going to have to check that out. I'm going to keep that. Haven't seen it. Michelle Piccoli, Juliette Binoche. Where's Carax? Music by Benjamin Britten, David Bowie, and Sergei Prokofiev. Okay, I'm going to find a copy of that one. I'll let you know in some future video. Parasite Murders, the first Cronenberg movie. Yeah, the early Cronenbergs are great. Keith F says, Marisa Boxer purchased set of 50 silent horror classics, worth every penny. Yeah, there's so many things that are just coming out now and falling into public domain, which is kind of interesting. In the next few years, public domain is going to go mad. By the end of the decade, Batman's going to be public domain. Superman's going to start being in public domain. The original iterations of them. So get ready for that. And also the second Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey movie is coming out. And to be fair, based on the trailer, it's going to be a lot better than the first one. Good, solid horror movie with Winnie the Pooh. And one of the other horror movie monsters in it is going to be Bambi, because Bambi's public domain now too. That stuff is going to be interesting to see. There's also another YouTube movie channel, Momdo Chiklovek. One of the missions is to track down copies of every film in the UK video Nazis list. That's a bit of a job, but yeah, I can see it. Friday says, "Want to do an episode about communist genre movies? Please include Vampires in Havana, the animation from Cuba." Let me just check that out. I have done videos about Russian Fantastica movies from the communist era. There are a lot of them. It's not zombie Bambi, it's feral Bambi. It's like full grown, deadly deer Bambi, which is going to be a lot of fun. Second Pooh movie isn't quite out yet. I know that it's being released really, really soon, but I don't know if it's out yet. And it'll be great to get a copy of it too. And I'm hoping that Umbrella send me a copy. FG, take care. And thank you very much for the birthday wishes. And I've just gestured, so the camera's gone weird again. So I've got to remember not to gesture too much, otherwise the camera starts zooming in and out. Because I've got AI gesturing on the camera. Super 70s. You like 70s action exploitation? I recommend Defiance with Jan Michael Vincent taking on a New York street gang with Danny Aiello and R. Carney. That's a great combination cast. Yeah, Jan Michael Vincent had such potential, but unfortunately, his demons overtook him. Never a fantastic actor. He was good in The Mechanic with Charles Bronson. I think that may have been his best role. But yeah, Jan Michael Vincent did some weird action films. Friday says Bambi is great in Godzilla meets Bambi. Yeah, but too short a role. I think it was very underwritten. If you haven't seen Godzilla meets Bambi, you should check it out on YouTube. I saw it on 8mm a long time ago. It was shown in the cinema. Patrick Simba says, I guess it would be Bambi's mum now that I think about it. Yeah, possibly, but it's definitely Bambi. They're doing a thing called Ruined Childhood Cinematic Universe with the Pooh and the Bambi things. And there are a lot of public domain children's stuff that the makers are rolling into this cinematic universe of theirs. And all strength of them. I don't mind this stuff. I think Godzilla, I think Pooh, Blood and Honey was pretty weak, but it was their first movie and they just scraped together money and made something. But because it made so much money, they're starting to get better and better at this kind of thing. Yes, Bambi's role was spread a little thin Friday. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. Public domain, really big IPs are going to become public domain. And so you're going to get people making their own Batman movies. And some of them are going to be good, some of them aren't. But either way, they're going to get out there and it'll be fun to see what they come up with. Yeah, middle-aged kid girl walked out on Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. She's a big Winnie the Pooh fan. She's got Winnie the Pooh and Eeyore tattoos. Godzilla and Bambi, surely they fought at different weights. You got to see it. It's a short film, Keith. Super 7 says, I love 1960s Euro Spy flicks and wish they do a 25 or 50 title box set. Have the Sword and Sandals and several others. Yeah, finding decent Euro Spy flicks is difficult. I mean, I've got the OSS 77 box set that I think Kino Lorber put out. There's also the ones with Ken Clark and people like that. I did a whole video about Euro Spy as a genre way back early in the channel, and it got really good response. Euro Spy is just the best stuff. And people should also check out Super 7, Sandra West and more, because you're making Euro Spy movies. We know that. And they're always a lot of fun. Roger Morgan says, Leviathan, watery horror science fiction film. There were a few around in the 80s. Everyone was copying The Abyss, which I kind of like parts of, but I don't like overall. It's kind of like Close Encounters with Bubbles. Kayan says it's a strange thing with the impending death of physical media. There's never been so much obscure stuff available before. There's not going to be a death of physical media. It's going to go niche. A lot of the mainstream stuff is going to become less available. But there's enough of a dedicated fan base for physical media that they're going to keep doing stuff like this and stuff like this in the future. There are bums on seats. Umbrella and Imprint are doing fantastic business and are really producing the obscurities and giving us a lot of added value to them. I'm getting a couple of things this week from Umbrella which are going to be really good, including a premium box set version of Dead End Driving and a couple of other obscure horror movies, which I'm looking forward to getting. I'm getting a copy of Bully as well. Just really weird stuff that needs a bit more oxygen. And I mean, mainstream stuff is inevitably going to go to streaming mostly. But this obscure stuff, physical media is still the way to go. Friday says, a middle-aged geek girl, yay, big Eeyore fan here. First Moby goth in literature. Have a big stuffed Eeyore that I use as a pillow. He's very well loved. Middle-aged geek girl has a lot of Eeyores. Middle-aged geek girl says, if fuck Disney stopped owning everything, the situation would be better for physical media. Yeah, because Disney has stopped producing physical media in Australia, though they are outsourcing their physical media to other companies. So we may get a resurgence of it, I don't know. Keith F says, another obscure movie not seen much these days, Requiem for a Heavyweight. Really, really good film, beautifully acted. I've got a DVD copy of it with Anthony Quinn, based on a Rod Serling script. Really good movie. Janet says, have I mentioned the short film from Spain, Fist of Jesus? As always, another great live stream Q&A. Got to get up tomorrow eventually. Take care. Yep, thanks, Janet and Ned. Take care of yourselves. And it must be like stupid o'clock in Spain, so take care and get some sleep. Middle-aged kid girl says, I relate to Eeyore, Tigger, and Piglet with my mental health issues. Yep. There are times when you're Tigger and there are times when you're Eeyore. But we get through them all. Yeah, but to get back to horror movies, I kind of like modern horror movies as well. The Terrifier movies I wasn't expecting to like, but I ended up liking. And I'm waiting for the third one to come out. There's a thing coming up, which is just getting a physical release in Australia called, what's it called? Time Junkies, which is about time traveling meth heads in Melbourne, which I'm looking forward to. There's a lot of obscure stuff coming out that has a very trauma feel to it. And I like that. I like kind of street level horror movies. Roger says, got another red box set, Icarus File, movie, book, and soundtrack. Yeah, I got the imprint box set of the three movies, Icarus File, Funeral in Berlin, and The $1 Billion Brain, which for me is the box set I'm happy with. It'd be nice to get the soundtrack for the Icarus File. Really good John Barry soundtrack. Also like the soundtrack to $1 Billion Brain by Richard Rodney Bennett. That is a weird soundtrack. Richard Rodney Bennett didn't do many soundtracks for movies. He did this one and he did Murder on the Orient Express, but they're really, really good. Keith says, any interest in The First Omen? Not a lot. If it comes on a streaming service, I may watch it, but for a start, I hear some bad things about it. And also, I'm not engaged with the Omen trilogy. Maybe it's a bit too mainstream for me. Who knows? But yeah, and the interesting thing is there's a lot of good Australian horror movies coming up. Things like Talk to Me and Late Night with the Devil are Australian movies made by usually small Australian film producers who have found a way to start with a really good script, get the right actors, and produce horror movies that are really punching way above their weight in the international market. I'm really hanging out to see Late Night with the Devil. Doesn't come out for about another week here, but I think I'll have fun with that one. I like David Dasmalchian as an actor, and he looks good in this one. He also writes comic books, so you've got to love any actor that writes comic books as well. Jamie says, I saw the trailer first time, it looks awful. Possibly. I haven't seen it, but I hear bad things. Kian says, have the Impress File soundtrack. Bit disappointing if I remember right. Love the main theme, but every other track was a variation on it, which is the way John Barry did it. If you have a listen to any John Barry soundtrack, in particular The Black Hole, they're all variations on a theme. But still, it's John Barry, so it's always fun. And I kind of like his soundtrack for The Deep, which is another movie that came out on imprint. Yeah, it's got to be one of my 70s vulgar pleasures is The Deep with Nick Nolte, Louis Gossett Jr. and Jacqueline Bisset. And by the way, Lou Gossett just died, unfortunately. Really fun. Roger Morgan says, Australian movies on the UK nasty list, Razorback and Brain Damage. Razorback I like. A friend of mine, Lewis Morley, made the pig's head for Razorback. And about 25 years ago, I went to dinner at his house. And above the fireplace is the original head from Razorback. Enormous. It just jutted out of the small lounge room they had at the time. Most of it was made of foam and they never used the fireplace, so it didn't get damaged. But you walk into their house and there's a giant Razorback head on the wall. Such a dumb, fun movie. Keith F says, the first Omen, I won't bother. I love the Omen and bits of the second one. After that, the franchise bombed. Yeah, sometimes the cash cow gets milked until it's beef jerky. And that often happens, unfortunately. John Barry did a wonderful soundtrack to Somewhere in Time. Yeah, he did. Also, he did Beat Girl back in the 1950s. So a lot of really iconic soundtracks came out of his work. But if you can find the Richard Rodney Bennett soundtrack to Billion Dollar Brain, that is special. Any opinions on Immaculate? Haven't seen it, I probably will, and I'll know more then. Kian says, what's your price limit will you pay for box sets? Hope the wife is listening. Middle-aged good girl is listening. It's what I've got available as a budget sometimes. I'll stretch a point where I can if I think it's going to play well on the channel. And with these two logo for my birthday, I'm going to do a deep dive into it on future videos so that they'll get some use there. But it really does depend what it is. If it was something exceptional, like there was a box set of Darker Than Amber, I'd get that. Or if there was a box set of the Ginger trilogy done really well, I'd get that. But it just depends on what I got available and where my budget is at that particular moment. Franny says, I still have a soft spot for the Black Hole. Not quite sure why. The music's good, but it's a terrible flop. Maybe it's something that really could benefit from a strong reboot. Maybe not. Any movie that has one of the main characters say near the start of the film that they're in space looking for habitable life is a movie that just needs to be kicked into the bin. Damien says, Lewis is such a lovely guy. He was a guest at SwanCon. Yeah, I've known Lewis for a long time, and he and Marilyn are really great people and have contributed physical special effects props for a lot of good Australian movies. And yes, the wife is the moderator. Yes, you are, middle-aged good girl, and I appreciate your work. Damien says, I too save my pennies with box sets. Yeah, I mean, I understand why a lot of box sets cost a lot of money. And they are, at times, really expensive, but there's a lot of work goes into them, particularly when you've got something like, say, the Mario Brothers box set that just came out. Not a great movie, but it's got an incredible nostalgia factor for certain people who were kids when the movie came out. It's got so many extras. It's got posters. It's got lobby cards. It's got a book about the making of the movie. It's got 2 different scripts in the box set of the movie, a revised script and an original script as well, that are like this thick. Tons of work get put into this. It's a labor of love. So I understand why they cost so much, but I also understand why some people can't afford them. Yeah, Damien, the script for the Black Hole should have been a lot better, but it wasn't, unfortunately. But I'm in the fortunate position right now where Imprint and Umbrella are sending me things. And I feel I get imposter syndrome about that sometimes, but I always try to give full value when they send me things by featuring them. I won't say they're good when they're not, but in featuring them and showcasing them and saying these things are available and you might want to consider them and they might be good for you. But and that is helping to fill up the shelves a lot. But yeah, box sets are expensive, but selectively I can kind of sort of afford them. Roger says some great Hammer box sets recently. Great Mummy one with Christopher Lee. Don't tell me that, I'll buy it. Cayenne, I think the least impressive part of some of these box sets of obscure filmmakers are the films themselves. The packaging can be better than the films. Yeah, that's the thing, and it depends on whether you like the auteur or not. Imprint are doing box sets where they're featuring actors. They've done one for George Papard. They did one for Jessica Lange. They did one for Marlon Brando, which is excellent, and it's a beautiful 4K of One-Eyed Jacks, amongst other things. And they're going to do a second volume of Marlon Brando ones. There are some really fine box sets out there, and if you like the particular people making them, they're going to be very attractive to you. Damien says, Umbrella's doing great stuff. Must talk to Leela. She wants attention. Okay. Thanks for dropping in, Damien. We're going to be winding up in about 15 minutes anyway. So we'll go back to the AMA. Any last minute questions people want to ask? Because I'm up for it. But yeah, people should check out umbrellaent.com.au because Umbrella is doing such interesting stuff. And if you do have the money to buy some of the premium box sets, they do have box sets that are only available in special editions on their website. And some of them are spectacularly good. Bennett says, loving the new trend for cardboard cases too. Yeah, I think they're just as durable as the plastic ones. But I like the fact that certain companies are doing that. And it's way of the future, really. It makes sense to do that. And also keeping the printing simple. People don't necessarily want glossy colored prints on everything. And I'm happy to have the movies and the extras and cardboard covers. Roger says, watch some movies on streaming sites that were cut, so I bought the Blu-ray. Well, that's the lovely thing about this stuff is if you have physical media, it's not going to change. It's not going to be like George Lucas with Star Wars, where he finger painted over various aspects of the movie because he wanted to, and he had the rights to, and screw the audience. Once you've got a physical copy of something, it's unchangeable, except for bit rot, which I don't think happens very often, particularly in my climate. But there's a solidity and wonderfulness to physical media where you're not at the whim of programmers who can knock a whole series of something off a platform just so they can make room for something else. Kean says, postage to Ireland might be a bit steep, aka colossal. It's the same problem I have with getting English or American stuff. There are things like the Tokusatsu box set I got, which was egregiously expensive, mostly because of postage. Keith says, Terry, if dinosaurs still rule the earth today, What would the cinema going experience be like for we humans in the 21st century? I think we'd have to have a lot sturdier cinemas. I think that there'd be a lot of YouTube channels with idiots getting stomped to death or eaten by dinosaurs, particularly those kinds of YouTube channels where people do stupid things. Um, I think there'd be a lot of YouTube channels about raising baby dinosaurs and also cooking them. There'd be a lot of really interesting cooking channels where somebody gets an enormous smoker to smoke a whole brontosaurus in Uzbekistan, that kind of stuff. And Richard says, if physical media is destined to become niche, does that mean it's going to become expensive? Sometimes yes, but when it becomes more niche, there are also going to be opportunities to put out bargain versions of it. Imprint's doing that already. Imprint put out a whole bunch of stuff which was limited editions to like 1,500, 3,000, something like that. They're also now putting out cheaper versions of those movies as individual discs and sometimes as combinations of a few discs, which just have the movie in the same quality as the original edition. And so people who are on a budget can buy the movies. They don't get all the bells and whistles, they don't get the extras and the booklets and the lobby cards and all that kind of gear. But they are able to access the movies, which, in spite of me being a physical media collector, the guts of it is the movies. There are a lot of physical media collectors who want the 4K, who want the best of everything, who want everything and everything. And the movies they're picking up are incredibly prosaic mainstream movies. But I think at the core of it is the movie itself, whether it's got grain or no grain. I'll talk about something else in a moment. But there are budget options with physical media becoming niche. You just got to keep your eyes open and you will find them. And they're not bad options. Yep, you won't get all of the frills, but you'll get the film. What I was going to say is James Cameron's put out a few of his movies, including True Lies, on 4K, and he's partly used AI to enhance them. And from what I've seen of True Lies, it looks shit. The original film was grainy a bit. Also, Aliens. The original films were grainy a bit because they things like Aliens was filmed in low light, so there's obviously a little bit of grain in the original footage, which is part of the atmosphere. And James Cameron's come along and just knocked all that out and smoothed everything out and Botoxed the whole movie. And people are really, really upset with that and going back to their DVD and their Blu-ray copies of it. You got to be careful with that stuff. And even though some things can be done as far as enhancing video, there are some things that shouldn't be done. Keith says, I reckon a few months ago it would have been a straight choice between seeing Barbie, Saurus, and Oppenheimer Dog. I'd watch both. Roger says, when dinosaurs ruled the earth, uncut version, don't show it to the kids. No. Christopher says, did I ever have ambitions to make movies or write scripts? No, I like writing about movies. I like talking about movies. And when I do a video, a lot of it's like writing because I make my notes and then I usually do a stream of consciousness to the camera. And then I edit out all the ums and ahs and the diversions that I don't really need. So for me, it's a lot like writing an essay about the movie. And that's what I love. I love putting together my insights about things and seeing them. I don't particularly have a need to express myself in cinema, but I have a need to express myself about cinema. And a lot of people who do what I do have gone on to make movies, and all strength of them. I hope they do incredibly well with them. But it's not my speciality. I'm a bum on seats who can talk about stuff. And also, getting together a film crew will be problematic for me. There are times when I don't play well with others. And as middle-aged good girl said, if you haven't already, hit the like button. You can also do a super chat and give me a birthday present if you want to. Damien says, I'd rather have film without the bits and pieces. I heard the Cameron release has been disappointed. Oh, it's incredibly bad. I've seen some of the still shots, and Schwarzenegger's face is just machine smooth. Friday says, have a lovely birthday. I will. It's next Wednesday. Is it next Wednesday? Or Wednesday? No, it's Wednesday next week. Kayan says, Cameron wasted too much time on Avatar. Paid off financially, but it's dull. Yeah, Avatar's such a weird experience. Lots of people saw the movie, and the second one, it made $1 billion each, more than $1 billion. It made a shit ton of money, made all the money. But the cultural impact of the Avatar movies is zero with the rim removed. It's just nothing. People aren't writing fan fiction about it unless it's adult material. It's a null. Yes, people go to see it for the spectacular effects, but it doesn't engage something in the audience that really good films do. And that's fascinating. I'm not sure what it is. But there's something there that's seriously lacking. Richard Hart said, I remember when Predator got the Botox experience, it was horrendous. Kane says, I wouldn't like to try to administer Botox to the Predator. It's easy. You use a dart gun. But yeah, James Cameron's a weird filmmaker. He had so much, and if you look through his filmography, there's no deep characters, with the possible exception of a couple of characters in The Abyss. There's no real deep characters in a James Cameron film. Roger Morgan says, seen Harryhausen footage smoothed out with AI flow better, with AI flow better, but charm was gone. I think it works for the skeleton warriors in Jason and the Argonauts, but not for a lot of his other things. Daniel Geese is lacking talent, possibly. Middle-aged kid girls quoting Predator. If it bleeds, it can get Botox. Yeah. Thank you, middle-aged kid girl. Maybe his pursuit for perfection has hampered his film work, says Kane. Yeah. He wants to physically perfect the look of something, but the thing he's forgotten is there's got to be a heart there as well. And so few of James Cameron's movies have any heart to them. I think if I was going to say which James Cameron movie do I like the best, I'm going with Piranha 2. Way back early in his career, I like Piranha 2 for some reason. It's a fun movie, and I like all the Piranha movies. I like Piranha 1, I like Piranha 2, I like Piranha 3 Double D with the added gratuitous nudity, but a really funny premise and a really funny delivery on it. Yeah, Piranha movies are fun. So, any last minute things people want to say? Because we're clicking down to about 8 minutes left. And then middle-aged geek girl, I've got to go out and do stuff. Well, this has been a fun one too. I should theme the live streams a lot better. By the way, did anybody look at the theme song? Anybody who's a Patreon, I actually got AI to write a theme song for the channel. I'm going to release it more broadly to the channel in a little bit, but I've got to give the patrons just a little bit of love and give them a bit of extra content. Have I seen the Panos Cosmatos film Mandy? Amazing looking film, but it has Nick Cage. I don't mind Nick Cage. I haven't seen it, but I will. Thank you, Monteval. Appreciate the birthday wishes. Keith says, I read on today that Wilson O'Brien was slated to do the monsters for Irwin Allen's The Lost World, but Fox got involved, stopped O'Brien from getting involved, and we ended up with disappointing monsters. Yeah, we had the lizards with spikes on their heads. Friday says, can we make a science fiction version of Ferngully and Pocahontas as AI prompts and make Avatar movies faster? That's possible. There is a YouTube channel called Abandoned Films, which does AI 1950s versions of more recent films. They've done Dune as a 1950s film trailer. They've done Avatar as a 1950s film trailer. But I think it's Abandoned Films or Abandoned Movies. You might want to check that out on YouTube. It's got some short AI generated movie trailers for 1950s versions of modern films, including The Avengers. Worth checking out. Damien, you take care too, mate, and thanks for supporting the channel. I appreciate it. Super7 says, I wish Darker Than Amber with Rob Taylor will get the Blu-ray treatment. Not even on DVD. Yeah, Darker Than Amber is fantastic. It's not a great adaptation of John D. MacDonald's original novel. It does take some liberties, but it's really good. And I think it's got such a strong vibe. Directed by Robert Klaus, who also directed Enter the Dragon. Great action scenes, great character bits, good Rod Taylor role. He was such an underrated actor. He could do comedy, he could do drama, he could do action. Yeah, Darker Than Amber is the kind of hidden gem that hasn't been dug out of the ground yet for decent release. Keith says, pushing 1 a.m. Indeed, Shadow. Thanks and happy birthday for that. Thank you, Keith. And thanks for supporting the channel in so many ways, mate. Yeah, Darker Than Amber, I would love. The moment Darker Than Amber comes out anywhere, I'm going to buy a copy of it. In spite of middle-aged geek girl frowning right at the moment. That's the holy grail for me as far as physical media releases are concerned. Roger says, shout out for This Island Earth. Yeah, first science fiction movie I saw in the cinema. Love This Island Earth. Lolo Schifrin is still with us, 92 years old. Yeah, his soundtrack for Enter the Dragon is Chef's Kiss. In fact, it was one of the first soundtracks I bought on cassette, was the Enter the Dragon soundtrack. May even still have the cassette here somewhere. Who knows what we've got in the man cave. It's a bit like the warehouse at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, this place. Okay. Yeah, Damien likes my theme song, and Patrick likes my theme song. I'm going to do variations on it too. Do you want me to do a theme song for Science Fiction Saturday? I'm tempted to do a kind of rockabilly theme song for Science Fiction Saturday using AI, because the theme songs are fun. Just give me a moment. I'm going to give you guys a bonus. Won't be a second. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay, here we go. Here is the link to the theme song I had AI generate for me yesterday for the channel. You can click on that later, the Google Drive link. Middle-aged Good Girl says, but AI is evil. Kayan says, you might release an AI album. Who knows? The future is unknown to us, and AI music is interesting. I mean, I'm playing with the technologies. Any new technology that comes down the pipe, I'm going to give it a go and just noodle around with it a bit and enjoy it and see what I can do with it. I'm already using AI generated images for the backgrounds in my thumbnails for the channel at times. I'm not using it for the foregrounds very much, but it makes an interesting background for some of the images of people in the movies that I put up there. Access denied. Oh, sorry about that. Finally, let me just see what I can do. Let me open this sucker up. Might be a sec. Okay, anyone with the link? Here we go. Try this, people. try this one now. I should do a Food and Planet style thing for the science fiction Saturday. Or is that a bit on the nose? Who knows? I might be able to do it. Let me know if this link works. Yeah. Yeah, we've got to go. It's time. It's time to end this live stream. Thanks a lot to everybody who's a part of it. Love the fact that you joined in. Love the interactivity of the live streams. And there it works. Thank you, Franny. I appreciate that. You guys take care of yourselves and enjoy the rest of your week. I'll be back in a couple of days with another video. And until then, keep watching the good films, keep watching the bad films, and take care of yourselves.